welcome to Jill Pearson Profiles. I'm your host, Jill Pearson. Our guest today is, again, Gail Steketee. Thank you so much for coming back. Gail is Dean of the School of Social Work at Boston University, where she's been a professor for more than 25 years. She is a fellow in the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare. She has published she's published 13 books. She has a new book coming out in 2013, and 3 of her books are being revised to be republished in 2013. She has authored more than 200 articles and chapters, and she has received several grants from the NIMH and foundations. So Gail, I can't thank you enough for coming back again, because we need to finish talking about several important things. And one of those things is there is a new diagnostic and statistical manual coming out in 2013, I understand. They're going from DSM-4, there will be the DSM-5, and that is the manual for mental disorders that is used by pretty much by all clinicians in the US. Can you tell us what's going on with that in relation to hoarding?
Well, in the new DSM-5, there will be a diagnosis called hoarding disorder. We understand that this has recently been voted on by the American Psychiatric Association group that is working on this. Hoarding disorder will be listed underneath the OC spectrum conditions, so the obsessive-compulsive spectrum conditions. And we'll have a formal diagnosis, so people who have this problem will be able to be seen by a mental health clinician and receive the third-party payments necessary to get them proper treatment.
So having that in the DSM is important for insurance coverage.
Absolutely.
For clients.
Right.
So that is a real step forward.
It is.
Okay, that's good. Now, you were telling us at the end of the last show about the downward arrow. What other sort of homework does a client do?
A client would do a number of things at home. So as clinicians, we try to go to the home approximately once a month, more often if we can. And you might want to be aware that many times we'll involve someone else in helping us go home to assist a person. So the kind of homework that they'll do would be initially, for example, sorting things to get them into the right boxes and bags, however it is that they're going to get them to the final destination. So we would have them practice sorting into categories they're going to get rid of. They're going to discard it as trash, or they're going to recycle it, or they're going to give it away to someone, or they're going to sell it, for example. That would be a typical getting rid of set of categories. And then if they're going to keep them, they have to organize them into the kinds of objects that we would put in the various rooms of our homes. Is this kitchen items that go into the cupboards? Is this paper that needs to be kept because they're legal or financial papers? Do we have things that belong in the desk because they're useful for staplers and pens and pencils and this kind of thing? So organizing, planning. And the other kind of thing that we might do as homework that wouldn't necessarily be done in the home is working on not acquiring.
Right. And that may be, someone might be a compulsive shopper.
Yeah.
Or someone who goes to a flea market every week, or yard sales, or as you mentioned before, on trash day, they may go out and see what people have put out for trash.
Right. Right.
So that's the beginning of the pipeline, as it were.
That's right. And so one of the critical goals of treatment is to stem the tide, if you will. Mm-hmm. We need to help people limit quite severely what they're bringing into the house, because no matter how hard you work on sorting and organizing things and getting rid of them, if too much stuff is coming in, then it's sort of a self-defeating effort. So they need to practice non-acquiring. And we have we do it in a kind of a hierarchical way. So one of the first things we do is what we sometimes call drive-by non-shopping, in which they're accompanied by someone who is helping them resist the urge to accumulate.
And it may be a friend or relative.
Absolutely. Somebody who has been trained a little bit or has learned a lot about hoarding and can assist them without being critical and having a negative interaction with them. We don't want that. That won't help.
That would be the coach.
That's
that
a coach.
The client would choose from among their friends or relatives as someone who can be uncritical and supportive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that supportive role is very important.
Yes.
So they might get in a car and drive nearby and slow down and go slowly past the favorite store with the sale sign in the window. And then the next step might be walk through non-shopping. Again with the coach, where they're walking through a favorite place, like you said, a flea market or a special shop, a clothing store, whatever it might be. And they're looking at objects, but not touching. They're just sort of observing and getting used to being in the presence of things they would like to have and resisting the urge to do it.
And it is very difficult for them to resist the urge to touch.
Indeed, it is. Especially, and we work our way from easier settings to harder ones.
Mm-hmm.
So for all of us, we have our favorite challenging places that it's very hard to resist buying something in. And then the final one is, browsing and picking, non-shopping, if you will. You pick it up.
You can touch
it.
it.
You look at it. You decide, and so forth. And you put it back down and walk away. That's the very hardest thing for people to do. And again, we would do it gradually, starting with things that are easier to resist and working up to the ones that are harder to resist.
So it's a gradual process of desensitization, as it were.
That's correct. That's
okay.
a good way to put it.
Okay. And some people may wonder, why don't you just go in and clean out the house? Have somebody clean out the house?
Extremely good question and a terrible idea. We have learned, not from our own experience, but from observing others, that in a number of situations we have had people come to us very reluctantly after they have been cleaned out.
Forcibly
cleaned out.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some circumstances where, unfortunately, this probably does have to be done when the home is condemned because it is in disastrous shape. The floorboards are no longer stable. People should not be moving around in a home. Or it's a rodent-infested place. Then it's physically dangerous to be there from a health perspective and physical harm. And at that point, a person really can't stay in that home. Now, the question is always, what can we do to try to help the person whose home it is take with them things so that they could do some sorting of them? But every now and again, we'll find a home that is so squalid that that's not possible.
I see.
And in those circumstances, unfortunately, a clean out is probably the only way to go. But we do need to be aware that it is devastating for someone to have that happen.
Emotionally devastating.
Absolutely.
And not going to stop them from creating the same situation again.
Absolutely. That's the difficulty. And I like to sort of help us all think about it. If somebody came into our home and just cleaned it out and sent it away, how would we feel? Obviously, extremely
terrible. We would all
upset.
feel terrible.
Right. So what's much more important is to do this gradually with people so that they are involved in the sorting activity and are learning the skills. So if they're not good at organizing, they have to practice that over and over again. If they have trouble making decisions, which is a hallmark of difficulty discarding, people have trouble making decisions about whether to keep or whether to get rid of something.
Whether something is valuable or worthless.
Right. And they must do that decision making over and over again in order to retrain themselves to have the capacity to make those choices in favor of what's important to them in their lives and letting go of objects that are not important and are no longer serving them well. So lots and lots of practice of that type. And for that reason, a clean out is not very helpful until they have gotten a lot of practice at these things and can make a set of rules. So there are times, for example, in a recent study that we did where we had 26 sessions of treatment. There were a number of clients who did extremely well, and probably by the point at which they're in their 20th session or so, they've had a lot of practice doing something. Then at that point, we can invite our team a group of trained people in with us, and we could have half a dozen people there to help with a very heavily cluttered home that they've worked on but still have a long way to go because there's so much stuff in it. And at that point, they're very good at making a list of and rules.
The client will make the rules.
Exactly. The client makes the rules about what to keep and what to discard, and then everybody who's coming in sits together, understands the rules, and does the sorting for them and makes the decisions that the client has directed.
So the client can still feel in control of what's being done.
That's right. And then when you come upon something that doesn't fit the rules, you set it aside and that client handles those things.
I see.
Usually with a clinician who's helping them with it. So that can really move things forward very quickly, but it's only after a lot of practice that we would do something like that.
And how often do you see hoarders with this treatment get better?
A good bit of the time. So the data from our early study, our waitlist control trial, indicated that somewhere around 75% of people, when they finished the treatment, rated themselves as much or very much improved.
Wow, 75%.
So that's quite good. Now
Yes.
that still leaves us with 25% for whom we have a long way to go.
Yes.
And not all of those people were recovered. So we can
Yes.
probably get about 45% into a category that we would call more like ordinary
Yes.
homes than like a hoarded home. And 45% is actually very good progress for a relatively limited treatment period. But we would like to enhance our treatment a good bit more than this in order to feel like we were really doing the best we possibly
Okay.
could.
Is animal hoarding harder to deal with than the hoarding of objects?
We believe that it is, but the truth is there is a very limited amount of research on animal hoarding. And I think there's a very good reason for that, and that is that because animal hoarding gets people into trouble with the law.
Yes.
So by the time we discover animal hoarding, usually the person is already dealing with legal authorities about it. They're much more reluctant to participate in research at that point. And it's a much smaller group of people who have this problem compared to hoarding. Animal hoarding is less frequent
I see.
than object hoarding.
Okay.
So we don't know enough about it yet, and we hope to learn.
Well, I want to make sure that all our viewers have a chance to see the books that you've published that can help people so much with this problem. Because you and your colleague, Randy Frost, have put out these two books. The first one here is Treatments That Work, Compulsive Hoarding and Acquiring Workbook. The workbook is for the client. And this one is the therapist guide. This
Right.
book also put out by Treatments That Work, Compulsive Hoarding and Acquiring. So there's a guide for the therapist and there's a workbook for the client. And so while it would be certainly helpful for any clinician to have been trained specially, particularly by you, there may be people who don't have access to that.
Oh, indeed.
And a clinician anywhere would be able to obtain this therapist guide. And it really is so informative. I think it would give a clinician who wants to know how to deal with a hoarder a tremendous insight in how to begin and how to proceed. And meanwhile, if they gave their client this workbook, the client would be taken step by step through the learning process and the desensitization process and the downward arrow, and you just have a process of examining your own thoughts and understanding where your thoughts come from and what is motivating you to do things that I think is fascinating.
I'm glad you think so.
I
And
do.
That's why we wrote them.
And-
These are the ones we're planning to revise this coming year so that they're a bit updated from where we started in 2007 when we
Okay,
wrote them.
those came out in 2007. Stuff came out in 2010. And I would just like people to be aware of this whole series because I had never heard of it before. This series called Treatments That Work that comes from the Oxford University Press.
That's right.
And I'm looking at the wrong camera. I'm sorry. There are all these books that I just found out about that I think everyone should know about. There is one for treatment therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. There's Reclaiming Your Life from a Traumatic Experience, Overcoming the Trauma of Your Motor Vehicle Accident, Trichotillomania. Tell us what that is.
That's hair pulling.
Okay, right, that's what I thought. Okay. There's Overcoming Insomnia, Cognitive behavioral treatment of childhood OCD, Mastery of Your Anxiety and Worry, Mastering Your Fears and Phobias, Mastering Social Anxiety, Mastery of Your Anxiety and Panic, and Overcoming Pathological Gambling. I just was amazed to see these. I think this is a wonderful thing.
And there are now a number of others that are on there available from them. It is a whole series, and this particular series does require that there be good evidence in the research literature that these are effective treatments for that particular problem. So it's nice from that perspective.
Okay.
These are evidence-based therapies.
So these are well studied, and you know that there is a good effectiveness rate for these treatments.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So I think the public ought to know about these more because, you know, if you suffer from something, you may not know how to get to a clinician who would know how to help you. You may not know where to begin. So you can begin with the Oxford University Press with their website, and that will get you started. Okay. So you have also revised Buried in Treasures.
It will be revised along with the group because Buried in Treasures is the self-help version of what we describe in the therapist guide and the client workbook.
Right.
So,
well, I just have to say how impressed I am by the insights and the helpful details in these books.
if I can say one thing I think that your viewers might be interested in, and that is that Buried in Treasures was written to follow along these other books, but we have also discovered that it turns out to be a highly effective intervention strategy when used in groups of people, moderate-sized groups, 8 or 9 people in a group, with a leader who is not necessarily a mental health clinician, but is someone who's genuinely interested in the problem and has reasonably good leader skills. So even a non-professional can get remarkably good results by using this book. Following it along, it has step-by-step chapters. Randy Frost has done a recent study with Lee Schuer, who was a group leader, and got really remarkably good effects that are just about the same as we can do in an individual treatment. We were a bit shocked to discover how effective group intervention can be for hoarding. And I think it's partly because a number of people are a bit isolated and really enjoy meeting together in these contexts. And they get a lot of support out of it. They also feel kind of obliged to do their homework for their fellow group members.
Right, you've got to keep up with the group.
Which is a really good thing.
Yes. And you have people who understand what the problem is. You don't have to feel stigmatized.
Right, right.
They know.
Yep, absolutely. So I certainly recommend that, and I think there are a number of people who are interested in these kinds of support groups. And this is more than support. It really is an intervention group, but designed by the people who are doing the work themselves. So.
And they have a step-by-step guide.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And it really works. Isn't that something, though?
I think so.
I mean, I'm sure there aren't enough trained clinicians to go around.
No, there definitely are not, unfortunately. Although we do a lot of training. It's still a relatively new condition, not that well known, and very limited number of people trained in it at this point.
Well, it's good to know that someone anywhere could start a group using Buried in Treasures, and they would all go step by step together. Well, it would be better if the group leader had already been through the process.
Yes, and indeed that seems to be one of the best strategies.
Yes, and had recovered to a good extent.
Yes.
And then that person leads the others who are beginning. good to know that that works. What else should we tell people about hoarding?
I think, well, let me just talk a little bit about some of that acquiring behavior and some of the challenges. I think one of the things that we've learned from working on hoarding is that there are a number of brain patterns that seem to get established for people who hoard. That we see some of the work that we do on the sorting and organizing is part of that. The decision making is a piece of it. And I think that what we do is we find that people seem to have particular types of cognitive processing problems that make hoarding a consequence for them of those problems. So the attentional one is one that comes into play when we do treatment, for example. People get distracted easily when they're trying to just work on sorting things.
Right.
So that distraction has to be dealt with. And one of the ways that we do it when we're working with people in their home is a couple of things. One is to get a couple of tarps and cover everything on either side of the section you're going to work on. So you walk into the kitchen and the counters are covered and there are little bags around the floor and the kitchen table is mounded and so forth. Where are you going to work? And what we find is that it really is best to just limit the field of view for people who have attention deficit difficulties.
Sort of like putting blinders on a horse?
Yeah.
Little bit?
Yeah, no, you could say.
Okay.
That's definitely
so that a rabbit running by won't spook it?
Right.
Okay.
Right. One of my colleagues uses a hula hoop and just plops it down in the middle of thing and said, let's sort everything in the middle of the hula hoop and then we'll go on to the next section.
And the distractibility might not only be sort of an inherent attention deficit, but it could be because they don't want to face the emotions that will be brought up by the objects.
It's good that you raise that because it is one of the significant pieces of the hoarding problem. One of the challenges we run into is that we get both positive and negative emotions causing trouble for people. So in a typical anxiety type problem like obsessive compulsive disorder, it's the negative emotions that cause trouble. People feel anxious about something, or they get a little bit depressed or down or guilty about it. And that all happens in hoarding as well. So there's anxiety about, if I throw this out, I'll find out immediately that I might need it, and I'm anxious about that. Or I might make a mistake in getting rid of this and something else. The people also feel other negative emotions, the loss that goes with it. How am I ever going to part with this thing? I feel suddenly very attached to it, even though if that attachment is a little bit of a flash in the pan, which does occur. But there's a positive side, and that's part of what drives it. I'm sorting through this pile underneath the hula hoop I just created, and I discover something that I haven't seen in a long time that I'm very excited to see. So I'm excited about it, and that excitement draws me to it and leaves me with the idea that, oh, it's a good thing I'm doing this because look what I'm finding.
So that's motivating.
It's motivating, but it's motivating in the wrong way.
Oh.
So now I want to keep it because I'm excited.
But might
about
there
it.
be something in that pile that you should keep?
Oh, indeed. Indeed there is. Indeed there is.
Okay.
And of course the acquiring issue that I described before, we've seen a number of people whose eyes light up when they see something that they want, and then it's very hard to resist it, and we bring it in. So both of those positive and negative emotions play an important role. The positive emotions keep people wanting to keep their things or wanting to acquire them. The negative emotions keep them wanting to avoid throwing them away or getting rid of them. And it's kind of a double whammy in this problem.
And you make it clear in Buried in Treasures that this is not an easy process. This is a hard road to walk down, and a person has to be strong.
Absolutely.
The client has to want to do it and has to realize there will be tough times when you want to quit.
It is also why we use a number of motivational interviewing strategies with people. These are the kinds of things that are very helpful for someone, for example, with a substance abuse problem, who's ambivalent about whether they want to give up using whatever they're using,
Right.
because there's a high that comes from it. And so motivational interviewing was developed some years ago by Miller and Rolnick. They've done a wonderful job of publishing on this topic. They have a very good book on motivational interviewing. And we use some of the same strategies to help people think about what's important to them in their lives and what they're trying to accomplish. And sometimes you end up playing devil's advocate. Well, maybe now's not the right time for you to decide to work on this problem. Perhaps it's better for you to just hang on to all these things because they make you feel good. And when people feel kind of assaulted about, you should get rid of this, then they're more likely to dig in their heels.
Right.
So this is a strategy for helping them get past that piece of the problem and make their own choices about what they're going to do about it.
And every time they're able to talk about it or think about it, they may make a little bit of progress toward the place where they're ready to do it.
Right. We do find that people are still ambivalent even when they've made that initial decision. In the middle of the work, they will find that they're not so sure they want to continue down this path. And then we have to kind of back off a little bit and give them some room to think it through.
And it's, I'm sure, very helpful to have a coach who is a friend or relative who can learn from reading the book. That's one of the things I found most helpful in here were the sidebars for the coach that help the coach to understand what is the difficulty that the client is going through. And also, I think it's so clever that the client, when reading the book, will read those sidebars for the coach and understand what the coach is going through.
Yeah.
So everybody is sort of a little bit understanding what everybody else is trying to do. I think that's brilliant.
More power to Dave and to Oxford University Press for coming up with that strategy.
So I am so impressed with this, and I think that there's a great future that you are opening up by doing this research. And it will help not only hoarders, but I think that what you're coming up with will be likely to be helpful in other types of compulsive disorders, don't you think?
I think so. I think that we do have some things to offer that might be useful in other fields as well.
Because it's a lot of things resonated with me when I was reading this. And people could really benefit from doing the downward arrow exercise many times in their life. I mean, why am I being so extreme about this? What is the worst thing that could happen? And then what would happen if that happened? I'm going to use that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. It is a helpful strategy.
For me, it's what would be the worst thing that would happen if the camera came on and I forgot what I was supposed to say to introduce you. So luckily that didn't happen to me today. And now we are almost out of time again. And I am so grateful to our guest, Gail Steketee, being Dean of the, what is the worst that would happen to me if I said a word wrong?
Not much.
Well, my viewers will understand. The Dean of the School of Social Work at Boston University. And I thank you so much for being here today and to help people understand what they can do about this problem that affects so many people.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for watching, and I hope that you will tune in again. I am reminded of something that I will share with you. When I was 16, I had to read in French the book Candide by Voltaire. And I was told that the last sentence of the book was very profound and had great meaning for all our lives. And the last sentence was, "Mais il faut cultiver notre jardin." And I knew that meant, but we must cultivate our garden, but I had no idea why that was profound. And it took me many decades until I finally figured it out. And I'll tell you next time. Think about that. It's necessary to cultivate our garden. See you next time.